The right habits put you in control of your health, relationships, mindset, and more. But most people lack the tools to stick with those habits long enough to see results. That is about to change. Welcome to the Unshakable Habits Podcast with your host, habit change specialist and speaker, Stephen Box. Join us each week as experts share their stories, experiences, and insights, and give you the tools to build unshakable habits so you can live life on your terms. It's time to take your habits from unsustainable to unshakable.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Unshakable Habits Podcast. I am your host, Stephen Box, and today I am joined by Lily Walford from Love with Intelligence. So, Lily, thanks for joining me today.
Hey, thank you so much for having me.
Now, you have this really interesting approach to dating that we're going to talk about today. And I know that because your approach is so unique, there is a really cool story behind it as well. So we're also going to dive into that. But before we do, I want to just quickly remind the audience about our Unshakable Habits framework, because that's the context at which we want to look at your story through, so that the audience can then take your story and apply it back to their own life. So it's a 3-part process. The first is you need a vision. Visions are different than goals. Goals are always about a specific outcome. Visions are about behaviors because they're about who we actually want to become, what we want our life to look like. Now, in order to make that vision come true, you're going to need to develop some skills, and that is the second part of the framework. Now, some of those skills you might already have, might just be a matter of learning to utilize them better. Some you might have to create. And if you have to create them, then that goes to step 3, which is all about taking regular, repeated actions to build those skills and make them a reality. So, Lily, why don't you start by telling us a little bit about this approach that you have to dating, because it really is unique.
Yeah, so cut a long story short, the way that we work at Love with Intelligence is we use a military-grade psychology in order to help people to read people so that they're able to make a informed decision on the partners that they meet, and they're able to have a compatible relationship that lasts. So through this approach, we can profile someone within 6 minutes or less, and also read someone's body language better than a polygraph machine, so we can see if someone's telling the truth or telling a lie. So this way you can create relationships from the truth.
Now, I was looking on your website, and you talk about how you really wanted to give people something that wasn't all about the mind games and the manipulation that a lot of the dating sites are really about. And you just kind of hit on that a little bit, talking about you want to give people a way to identify, what's actually happening, the truth. One of the things that was interesting to me in there was how you talked about how by being able to read people and profile them and actually realize, is this person being honest? Are they being authentic with you? It allows you to build trust actually faster than the old-fashioned way of dating.
Exactly. And I think this is so important because when we go into dating, we want to we want to make the best first impression possible. So what we end up having is almost like this person who's wearing this mask of the best impression. We've got this person wearing this mask, and these two masks are interacting versus the two people behind them. So a big part of this process is allowing people to remove the mask so they're actually interacting from who they are with the person that the other person is. So it allows you to build that authentic and genuine connection really quickly versus, we've all seen those things of say these 10 things to make them fall in love with you, or don't text them back straight away, and all these awful strategies that are actually there that break down true, genuine, and honest connection.
Yes, you coming from this particular background, me coming from the health industry, we both know all about bad tactics.
Oh, yes. dear, yeah. And people wonder why they don't work.
I don't understand why I can't lose weight and why I can't be happy in a relationship. I just don't get it.
Oh dear, yeah. From trying to survive on 50 calories and saying the script constantly of, yeah. I think I actually read this one on I think it was on YouTube. I always get curious when I see these ads. And it was like, oh, this, all guys need to hear this one thing to make them fall in love with you. And I was like, oh, go on, I'll bite. What's the saying? And it was something really gimmicky, like, I believe in you. And I'm thinking, are you kidding me right now? Like, I can't imagine people on a date just turning around and going, I believe in you, and then instantly they fall in love, and that's it, happily ever after. I'm thinking, oh, wow, yeah, something needs to shift, something needs to change for the dating industry.
Did someone like pull that out of a Hallmark Christmas movie or something? I mean,
Right, it is. It's exactly that, isn't it? You can imagine that sort of cringy like scene at the end. I believe in you, and they live happily ever after. But
I just offended like everybody out there who watches Hallmark Christmas movies. Like, they turned the podcast off now. They're done with me. So
oh, well, you never know. Could have actually just written the new Hallmark movie for Christmas. We're nearly at Christmas now, aren't we? So...
yeah, so who knows, right? Who knows?
Oh dear.
So I have to know what happened. Like, what is your story that led you to this? Because most people that I've talked to, and I've actually interviewed several people who are relationship experts, they've had some kind of trauma, or they've had some bad relationship they've gone through. But you're the first person that has like gone out and said, you know what, I'm going to learn military grade stuff here to actually learn how to get this right. So what is your story that actually led to you getting there?
Yeah, do you know what the funny thing is? I didn't quite grow up saying, okay, when I grow up, I'm going to become this military grade psychology expert in relationship and dating. So back when, probably 10 years ago now, I actually found myself in a very highly narcissistic, borderline psychopathic relationship. And this guy was a police officer, and gosh, this relationship was just horrendous. I found out I was cheated on. There's all these different things like being berated. It almost got physically violent. After that relationship ended, I was stalked for 5 years, and after the girlfriends that he met after me, he would take all three of them down, like obviously separately. Travel 150 miles to recreate the pictures that we had taken together when we were in our relationship. So quite an intense relationship, just to say the least. And it got me thinking, what is it that creates something that's actually healthy? What creates a healthy, loving relationship that lasts? And from that relationship, I ended up going, like normal people do, into another, narcissistic or toxic relationship. And this pattern just kept on playing out. And I thought at one stage that I cracked the code. I thought I was in a fantastic relationship, lived in a beautiful, 4-bedroom detached home in a beautiful part of the city in England, 2 brand new Mercedes on the drive. We both worked in corporate as well. So he was a sales director. I was a group accountant for a Fortune 500 company. So we were doing really, really well. And within one weekend, though, got that awful text as I was coming home from work saying, we need to talk. So I was like, oh, gosh. So within one weekend, that was it. It was job gone. It was relationship gone. Had to move house. Kept the car, which was great. But it got me thinking, okay, what is it, again, that creates a healthy, loving relationship? So I went on a bit of a soul-searching journey, and within 1 year, I became an NLP master practitioner trainer, a hypnotherapist, a life coach, a public speaker, started up a business, all whilst I was working full-time. I did all that within 1 year. And I think it got to the end of that year, and I was still single. I was dating. And my dating life was still absolutely freaking awful. Even after all this hard work on self-love and confidence and all these different things. And I was still attracting people who weren't right for whatever reason. And it got to this point where I was on a dating site and I'd messaged this person a couple of times, and you kind of get that vibe where it's like, oh, yeah, this is not going to work. So you kind of end the conversation politely. And the next day, they start messaging me again. I thought, okay, I'm not going to bother messaging them. It's not polite to leave them on. I've already said goodbye or whatever it might be. And the following day after that, I suddenly got 12 pink roses delivered to my house. Now, this person only had my first name and my profile picture, and they had somehow, just from that information, found my address. Now, as I said before, I was previously stalked for 5 years. So when this happened, I completely freaked out and was thinking, oh my gosh, I don't want to be stalked for another 5 years. This person knows where I live. This is not a good situation to be in, and self-worth and self-confidence isn't going to save me in this scenario. And back during that time, one of my friends was doing some work with a guy called Chase Hughes. Now, Chase, he's a world leader in behavioural profiling. He's got $30 million worth of government-backed research. So he trained military operatives, so about 2,500 military operatives, to like a James Bond, that kind of level. So sent a load of these screenshots, of the profile, of the messages. So they got a real good feel of like what was actually happening, what this person, who this person was, and all these different things. And within a few moments, I got a message back from Chase and my friend who was a trainer for Chase, with basically a list of steps of how to get this person to stop wanting to stalk me and send me stuff and contact me. And I was amazed because through that, I didn't have to be rude. I was polite. I didn't have to be nasty or anything like that. And within a few messages, this person completely left me alone. And it made me realize, like, oh my gosh, I need this for my clients. I need this. I need to know this in order to keep people safe. So I ended up going on a course with Chase, and it was incredible. We learned how to profile people within 6 minutes or less. We learned body language. We learned how to really connect with someone, get someone to really show their true self. And it was all these amazing things that I was just completely blown away by. And at the end of the course, I ended up speaking to Chase, and we ended up partnering up in business. So we actually could bring in all this military grade psychology into Love with Intelligence. So we could teach people how to profile, teach them how to learn how to read body language, so they could actually meet someone and see the truth straight away. And fast forward 2 years, we are now seeing people enter relationships within 3 months of working together, which is just freaking amazing. So people who've been in previously narcissistic relationships going into loving relationships and building them up. We've created a narcissist course, so identifying and disarming narcissist course, and we've helped people go through divorces, protect their children, all these different things, from being able to share this information with people to help them deal with these dangerous personality types, and also how to heal, and also this information to help people meet the one. So it's been quite a journey.
I have to say that actually sounds like really scary. I can only imagine what that would be like. Like this person, you said, literally just has your first name, not even your last name, just your first name and a profile picture, and they're able to find out your address. And especially having gone through that situation before, I can definitely imagine just how bad that must have been, and why that would have promoted you to say, you know what, let me go and learn this stuff and figure out what to do here. So
yeah, because it was interesting, because when you're dealing, it's one of those, we end up doing more for other people. We always do more for other people than we do for ourselves. And for me, it was like, okay, this is a scary situation to be in for myself. It's not nice suddenly getting someone stalking me or sending stuff to my house. But it did really make me think of, okay, what would I do if my clients went through that? And for me, it felt wrong to be able to work with people without knowing how to protect them in those scenarios. Yeah. Because, when you've got someone who knows, addresses and things like that, it becomes something so much more dangerous. And I know with those type of personalities in particular, the worst thing that you can do is block them. And the reason is because it creates this game. It creates this cat and mouse game of, okay, I can't contact you on here. I'm going to go on Facebook and find you. I'm going to go on, find you on email or whatever it might be, just to prove that they've still got power in order to be able to contact you or connect with you.
Yeah, and that's, what most people's first instinct would actually be, is to just block them, right? Just like, oh, let me just block them and get rid of them. But you're not going to get rid of them.
Not through that way. I remember even having a work colleague who, it was proper creepy. He was in his 50s, and I was in my very young 20s. And I had my work number, and he suddenly left the company. Goodness. And tried to message me on my work phone. Sorry, on my personal phone. So I blocked that number. Then he tried to message me on LinkedIn, go, I saw that you had blocked my number. So I had to block him on LinkedIn. And then, this is way before I learned all the behavioural profiling stuff. And then, I don't know if you remember or whether you've got an Android phone or an Apple phone, but on Android, there was this health app called Google S or something, S Health or something like that. And it used to count steps. Mm-hmm. And suddenly I get this message come through on that saying, so-and-so, I won't give the name, so-and-so has decided to challenge you to 10,000 steps. So it was even going down to the microscopic levels of trying to reach someone just because they can.
It's like, dude, at some point, take the hint, right? Like,
yeah. But the beauty is, like, with these personality types, so this is very narcissistic behavior.
Yeah.
And the thing is that most people don't understand with true narcissists, because narcissists become such a buzzword within the dating relationship community. But it's a true narcissist. The empathy part of the brain is actually underdeveloped.
Yeah.
So asking them to feel is almost asking them to, like a fish to walk or something like that.
Yeah.
They end up seeing people as resources, like a pen. Like, oh, how do I use this pen? Or how do I use a calculator? Or how do I use this phone? Because they don't fully connect with the person. It's like, okay, what can I get out of this person? How can I benefit from this person? Whether it's, a person who's got a higher status than them, or someone who looks good on their arm, or whether this is someone who's good at giving them compliments, or whether it's someone who's good at, doing chores or whatever it might be. And they'll learn how to use that person in a way that benefits them.
And I would assume that a lot of what you teach people is, in learning to read those situations, you can tell if that's the kind of person that you're dealing with very quickly and know whether to get away from that situation before they really have a chance to latch on to you.
Yeah. So we deal with a few different scenarios with our training. So there's obviously that one where you can identify and quickly get out and get away from that person. Or if you're in a situation where you've had a child with a narcissist, or you're divorcing a narcissist, or you've got a family member that's a narcissist, suddenly it's not like, oh, I can block you and I can get away from you and I can completely ignore you. We actually teach people how to communicate with those types of people in a safe way, because saying no to a narcissist is nearly impossible if you don't know what you're doing.
So speaking of that, and we're going to jump back into your story here in a second, but I know at the end of the interview here, we're going to have a giveaway for people. And you're going to talk to people about how to find that one. But that also is going to include 7 red flags that you need to be looking out for. So I'm going to have you maybe give us a couple of those at the end. So people have to now stick in for the entire interview just so they can hear that.
And they're juicy, I'm just saying.
Yeah, that's me shamelessly using manipulation to get people to stick around to the end of the interview.
Oh, dear.
Although, is it really manipulation if you tell people that's what it is?
It's always the intention of the manipulation. It's for their own good, so it's okay.
Your own good. You need to hear the entire interview. Stick around.
Ethical manipulation. There we go.
Yeah, there we go. Just make it sound better. I like it. So Lily, you kind of hit us like with this really like shortened version of your story. So I want to kind of dive into it a little bit. So you get this phone call like, hey, we need to talk. And then all of a sudden it's like, all right, now you're broken up, you've lost everything, but you at least got to keep the car, right? And then you kind of dedicated yourself to learning all these different things. And so I'm curious, was there a moment where you started to like blame yourself for these relationships, or at some point did you think they were the other person's fault? And if so, like at what point did you kind of come around to saying like, you know what, I need to make some improvements in my life to avoid these situations?
Yeah, great question. I don't think I've ever been asked that before, but it's such an awesome question, because the truth is, back then I blamed those relationships. It's like, oh gosh, I showed up, I was brilliant in those relationships, and it's all their fault. And it probably wasn't until I started sort of really diving into my journey and gaining some serious self-awareness. But it was funny, actually. It's different for the different relationships. So the narcissistic relationship that I was first in, that relationship, when that ended, I actually blamed a lot of myself. I was actually wondering, why wasn't I good enough? There was a time in that relationship where it was like, I need to stay in this relationship to protect other people from going through what I've been going through in that relationship, which is a very interesting mindset, because narcissistic relationships are very cult-like in the way that they can influence and change beliefs, and also chip away at your identity. So you tend to find people who go through narcissistic relationships, they come out and they're like, who am I? I lost myself in that relationship. And it's a genuine thing. You come out of those relationships feeling like you don't know what your emotions are. You can't make simple decisions. You're afraid to talk to people, trust people. It's quite messy. And then the relationship before I started going into the personal development realms, I think a lot of that relationship, I really blamed that ex-partner, because I felt so angry and let down. And I think that's the interesting part around relationships. There's this trust aspect where we have these expectations of what our lives are going to be like, and the expectations of that partner. And it was kind of like one of those things where it broke down so suddenly and unexpectedly. Like that morning we were talking about planning a holiday, and then in the afternoon it's suddenly like a breakup. It's like, whoa. But one of the most potent memories I had of that breakup was clearing out, you do that horrible thing of getting your own stuff, splitting all the stuff up and trying to pack. And I remember sitting on the kitchen floor and just thinking, like, I just couldn't believe the amount of pain that I was in. Like, I'd never felt pain like it. But it was that moment where it was almost like, I don't care how I'm going to do it, but I'm going to create this life that is absolutely freaking amazing. Even though I don't know how to create it, this is what I promised myself that I'm going to go ahead and do. It's almost like, if I'm going to leave this life that I thought was brilliant, I'm going to go ahead and make one that's even better. And I think I just always have to pinch myself, because if I told myself back then that I would be living this life and doing this kind of business and having the amazing relationship that I have now, and living in an awesome place, and all these different, working with someone or partnering up in business with someone with $30 million worth of research, I wouldn't have believed myself at all. Like, it was just not on my radar. But it was definitely a journey of actually understanding things like healthy relationships and what that actually is, and how two individuals need to take accountability and responsibility for the collaboration part of that relationship to make it work.
So the thing that's interesting, and going back to the framework to me, is we talk about that first step, which is vision, right? And you really just hit on it there. Like you talked about how in that moment, sitting on the kitchen floor, you kind of had this vision for what you wanted life to look like. And something that's been so cool to me in all the interviews that I've done with people, and when we start diving into their story, I see this over and over that their original vision is usually so small compared to where they end up. But it's just getting that vision in place. I think sometimes people get so caught up on, I have to get this like perfect vision and I have to know every little step along the way. No, you don't.
The stars don't quite align the way that we want them to in the beginning.
Yeah. It's set a vision, set a course, and start moving toward it, right? Like that's kind of what you did. Like you had this vision. You started just looking for ways to improve yourself because you had this realization of, you know what? I played some part in this breakup. And I need to look in the mirror and take care of the only thing I can control, which is me. I can't control the other person, so I have to control me. And so you took this step, you started improving, but even going through that, even taking these courses, learning all these things, earning all these certifications and degrees or whatever, is you still were having bad relationships.
And that was tough. I basically had a year where I absolutely killed myself through that year. Like, in terms of like working a full-time job, launching a business. I also had an keyhole surgery on my shoulder as well. It was freaking crazy. Like I was like sitting there with a sling trying to do my business with just like, tapping on the keys. I worked so bloody hard. And I remember, getting to the end of that year and having one of those moments where it was like, what did I just do all this for? And it was probably like one of the hardest moments. Everyone thinks that personal development and going into your vision is this thing of like, oh yeah, it just keeps going up and up and up. No. We have the highs and we have the lows. And I just remember that low thinking, oh my gosh, is this all there is? Or have I just done all this for just this? Yeah. And oh gosh, yeah. Like even something that played into that when I was doing my public speaking. I was on the public speaking course, and I was telling the telling my story, and I was getting the feedback at the end. And usually, like, when you have professional speakers, they have the big problem and the bad story and all these different things. And it's like, at the end of this, it's like they turned around to me and said, I'm not getting the payoff. You went all through this stuff, like, give us the payoff. What's so amazing now? And I just remember thinking, like, yeah, you're right. Like, where's my payoff? Like, I hadn't quite, it was almost like I was telling the story whilst I was still in it. And I hadn't got to that amazing place where I am now, which is in a fantastic relationship. We live in a beautiful barn conversion. We've got a gorgeous collie. We're out in the countryside. It's just freaking. And we're both self-employed. We both support and help people. And we have this amazing connection. We just love things like psychology and we just geek out on stuff all the time. It's freaking fantastic. And it was like, because I didn't quite have that and trying to tell my story from that kind of place, it just did not work.
Yeah, it can be difficult to tell people like your story when the payoff is theoretical, right?
Right. It was like,
difficult.
Oh, yeah, I'm a life coach and now everything's fine. Yay. It was like, yeah, I was just not at that place to say, it wasn't to say that my life hadn't improved by that point. It definitely had. But it wasn't at the place where it needed to be that kind of like that inspiration. Like, look, I've managed to get to the place where I want to be now.
Yeah.
It was kind of like I was still caught up in the wind.
It's interesting. I'm glad you brought this story because this is actually really common. I do professional speaking as well. And so I also hear this kind of feedback all the time. And the thing about it is, in that environment, it's the expectation. It's what
Mm,
you're going to get told. But the reality is, in bringing that back to life, I think sometimes we get too caught up in I have to have that big moment or I haven't made it. And it's so
yeah.
important to celebrate the progress, the process of it all.
Yes, and I think this is the thing, isn't it? It's like with personal development, it's not just about the goal, getting everything that you want. It's the journey of becoming. And I think that was something that I really needed to learn because, one thing I totally forgot at the very beginning of my journey, I had horrendous social anxiety to the point where, and this is cringy, thinking back, but to the point where when I went to go and greet the person who was like hosting the course, who was greeting everyone, giving everyone a main badge, and then the people were going into the room to go and get a chair. I had to do a walk a mile in London. I was a freaking mess, like literally full on anxiety, almost having this, hyperventilating. And, this person at the end of this hallway is trying to say hello to me and pass me a badge. I wasn't even in a place to be able to speak. I was be able to say, thank you. And that was it, just run off into the other room. By the end of the year, I was able to speak in a room full of people. I was able to help people. I was actually helping corporate executives at the end of that year to be able to do public speaking and improve presentations. And it's like, I think sometimes we can be so ungrateful for our journeys and that level of becoming and owning that story in that way. Because the one thing I've noticed is society, friends, family, colleagues, they love the people to play it small. And there's this, I don't know if you've ever heard of like the crab pot metaphor or mentality. So
Perhaps.
basically,
I've probably heard the American version.
oh, you don't talk about crabs in America.
We had the crabs in the barrel, which I'm going to assume is probably similar.
I'll see you've got a barrel, we've got like a bowl or a bucket or whatever. But basically, you put a crab in a bucket on its own, or a bowl, or whatever it might be, and it will climb straight out. You put two in, they will keep each other in the bowl, so they'll stop them.
Yeah.
If one tries to climb out, it'll drag it back in, and that's exactly what people do in society. Like I remember saying, "Oh, I'm about to start a business." And it's almost like you get this thing of like, "Oh, bless you. Well, I hope it goes well for you." And it's not genuine. It's not like, "Oh, that's fantastic," or there's no real belief behind it. And it's all these different things to be able to keep you back into society and keeping you playing it small because people know how to deal with you then.
Yeah.
If you suddenly grow or change or do, people need to readapt on the way that they treat you because our identity dictates our standards and our expectations. And when we start playing with our standards and expectations, it changes our reality in our life, which then feeds back into our identity.
Yeah.
So people have to relearn the way that they actually start to treat us and interact with us, which is really interesting.
Yeah, I saw something actually on Facebook yesterday, and I don't completely agree with the idea because I think anytime you start talking in absolutes, there's a danger there because there's
Yes.
always a time and place for things. But I like the overall idea of what it was expressing, which was the problem of putting other people first is that you teach them that you always come second.
Ooh.
And I think that kind of ties in real well with what you were just saying. Now, like I said, now there
Yeah.
are times you should put other people first. There are times you should put people above you. So I don't like this absolute idea of you should never put anybody else first. But
Yeah.
there's absolutely times you need to put yourself first, but you should never teach other people to put you second.
Totally agree with that. Totally agree. And it kind of it kind of filters into like the levels of love. And I don't know if you've ever heard of this before, but there's 4 levels of love. And number 1 is this thing of people who just tend to take. So they can receive love, but they're unable to give it. And you've got like the narcissists, alcoholics, those kind of people who are so self-absorbed, they're unable to be able to empathize or think of other people. Then you've got transactional love. I will do this if you do that. So you end up hearing like, for example, a lot of couples can end up falling into this habit of, well, if I do this, you do that. You do the dishwasher tonight because I've already done this, or whatever it might be, and it becomes into this like transactional battle.
Yeah.
Then you have unconditional love, where it's being able to just give love because you want to be able to do it. And then I can't remember what the last one's called, but it's kind of like the guru love. It's kind of like Tony Robbins, Mother Teresa, people are able to love everyone and anything, and it doesn't really matter what they've done or what the story is or anything like that.
Yeah.
So I'd love to hear how many people, how people get to that. But yeah, if you get to level 3, you're doing good. So it's kind of like going a little bit into that, I think a lot of that depends on where you're at as well in your journey, and also the people that you're dealing with as well, because you don't want to be able to put someone first who doesn't have your best interests at heart as well.
Yeah.
So, for example, if you're constantly putting a narcissist first, well, that's just going to be the energy vampire that's just going to suck you dry. You don't want to be like this transactional person, but sometimes you have to think about your boundaries and the way that you look after yourself. So, yeah, I know what you mean with the absolute things. There's always some sort of gray area.
There's always gray area. I like life in the middle. The middle is good.
Do you know what? That was something I always struggled with before getting into personal development. I was so like, black or white. It's either good or bad. And all of a sudden realizing, whoa, there's a middle bit. That was freaking eye-opening for me. And I think one thing that really opened that up for me was something that Chase said, and it's around see the suffering first. So it's almost like whatever situation you're in, if you're struggling with a situation or struggling to see the black or white, it's kind of understanding like what's the suffering that's had to happen for this scenario to take place, or for this person to act in this way.
Yeah.
And it seriously helps with the whole like seeing things in a whole different view and the level of compassion that you can give a situation.
Yeah. And I would even go so far as to say apply that to yourself, right?
Yes.
Because sometimes I think we maybe overlook just how traumatic things really are in our lives. We deal with them, and in the moment they might feel traumatic, but as we get further away from them, they're less traumatic. They just kind of become something we dealt with, but we don't understand the deep emotional scars that's actually left on us. So for example, if we kind of fast forward into your story a little bit, now, this may or may not have happened to you, but I know this is a common scenario where even once you've kind of learned all this stuff, you realize what's going on, you're in a better place, there's still that moment when you got into that better relationship where your guard is up just a little bit, where like you start to question if all the stuff that you've learned is actually going to work. Is this really going to be the one? And that all comes from those emotional scars of those past relationships.
Yeah, do you know what the funny thing is, actually? If it's sort of going back. So before I did all the work, and I went into my first relationship after the police officer, my guard was completely up to the point where if I went into, the new guy's flat, it would be like looking at, okay, how's the door chained? Where's the keys? If I need to get out, how do I get out? That's kind of where the mindset was. But I must admit, with the partner that I have now, I didn't really go through any of that, which was beautiful. And the reason I think that is was did like a crazy amount of training with Chase, but I could see the truth.
Yeah.
And it was one of the first times where I could actually fully be human with someone. And I know it's like a really interesting thing to say, be human with someone. But when you've got someone who is basically saying that they've got your best interests at heart and they really love you, and you can see through their body language that they're being completely open, completely truthful. And not only are they saying that, and you can see that they're being true through their body language. I mean, we're talking about reading body language better than a polygraph machine. So there's no escaping from telling the truth. But the other element is as well also seeing the actions back up the words. And I don't think like I have ever been through something so powerful in my life before. Like I remember the first time he said the words, "I love you." And like literally I can feel like goosebumps just like going up my arms even after all this time.
I can see you like lighting up right now as we speak.
And it was like, wow, this is kind of like real. He's actually meaning this. He's actually being truthful to this. And it just felt like I could just breathe. That's like the best thing I can kind of say. And I like being in that place, it's almost like, it's quite funny actually. We were having this conversation the other day. We were like saying, okay, what's love in a relationship? And the term that we kind of agreed, we both agreed on, was it's creating an emotional sanctuary where we can both come back to knowing no matter what's happening, whether it's an argument or anything external happening or whatever's going on, that we know we're safe, we're secure, and we're loved. And yeah, I think that is like the difference between that, you know, the conditional love where it's like, oh, I'll love you if you're good to me, versus I love you, I am with you no matter what. And yeah, I don't think I could ever explain that in research fully, but it feels freaking amazing.
No, I know exactly what you're talking about. You know, I shared with you that when I was launching the podcast, my mom had came to live with us, and after she had to have heart surgery, and you know, anyone who's ever had a parent come live with them for any period of time knows how stressful that can be, especially on a marriage. And you know, my wife, she's had things with her parents in the past, and we've always just supported each other. It's never been like an issue. It's never been any questions asked. There's no begging or pleading or anything like that. It's just this unconditional support.
Yes.
And I think the moment that I kind of realized what you're describing is when the person says to you, "Hey, I appreciate you doing this for me." And your thoughts is not, well, yeah, you know, I did that because you did this, or this, like there wasn't some like sense of obligation, like, oh, I had to do it or whatever. It was this genuine idea of what else would I even do?
Yeah. Yeah.
And you're right. It's like, it's the best feeling.
Yeah, I think, yeah, because it just sounds like you've hit that beautiful, like unconditional love space, which I don't think many people genuinely have in their relationships. Because even when I turn around to, you know, people I speak to, it's like, okay, look around. How many people have the relationship that you would actually desire?
Yeah.
I think a lot of people are stuck in that conditional place. So I think it's freaking awesome that you found that unconditional, euphoric kind of love, which is freaking amazing.
It is. I like the fact that you just pointed out something else too, that everyone has people around them who they're in relationships that might look like healthy relationships from afar, but they're really not. But if that's what you're surrounded by, you think that's normal.
So the interesting thing with relationships, so what I had to learn with like narcissistic relationships, because I remember thinking like, you know, why did I end up in a narcissistic relationship or a bad relationship? It doesn't matter if it's narcissistic or just unhealthy or wrong or whatever. Yeah. But it made me wonder, okay, why did I end up in those type of relationships? I had a great childhood, great IQ, you know, all these different things. And there's a few different elements at play. So number one, and the main one, like I'd say has about 70% of influence in our relationships, is our childhood and our identity as we grow up as a child. because between the ages of 0 and 7, that's where we actually create our identity. It's the way that we we teach people, where we learn how we get treated by people, the way that we interact with the world, and the reality that we create. So, for example, and this actually influences relationships, business, careers, success. And it's something called motivational intelligence, which is actually behind the reason people are successful or not. And it's simple. It's about the level of parenting that goes into building that child up. So, for example, if that child spilt a glass of milk or something like that, and that parent goes, "Oh, what have you done? Oh, you silly thing." Whoa, it's this big ordeal. All of a sudden, this child's in a dialogue going, "Oh, I'm so stupid. I spilled this. I'm always doing that." And it creates that identity. So you kind of automatically got a victim identity. We've got the vagal nervous system like tripping at in that moment, which means that they're not able to be a problem solver in that. Because when we're in a trauma state, our focus is to stay safe rather than being able to think big and to be able to solve issues. And, we create that identity of, okay, well, I need to be the person who knocks over stuff, does things wrong all the time because that's my place within society or relationships. Versus, knock a glass of milk over or whatever as a kid, and the parents go, "Oh, whoopsie daisy, never mind, let's go and get another glass. Right, we'll just move it further back, just a little bit so you can't knock it again. Never mind, we'll just clean it up." And it's a completely different thing. So even this has a huge impact on the success of someone. So when we think of roles, there's things like the victim, where if a child knocks over a glass, or they hurt their knee, they need that reassurance. There's that big, massive thing of, "Oh, you've done something wrong," okay, and babying them and all the rest of it. So they end up being babied as adults. So whether that's a work scenario and you hear them telling like a Jeremy Kyle kind of or Jerry Springer kind of story in the office, or you have them going into bad relationships, or you have people like the people pleaser. So the child who tries to please their parents all the time, and they end up going into careers where they have to go and people please to go and get that attention. So we usually have a lot of people who tend to be nurses who are people pleasers, because they love to be able to care and look after people, because that's the way that they give and receive love. Right. And again, when they go into relationships, they can end up going into relationships where it's constantly being taken and taken for granted. So it's like all these different things from childhood that can influence these type of relationships and the relationships that people enter.
Interesting. You probably just made a lot of parents out there like, "What do I do? What do I do when the kid knocks the milk over? I don't know what to do now."
Do you know what the beauty is? Like, I remember, it was a friend of mine who's a coach. He literally put a post on Facebook recently around the best thing you can do for your child when they turn 18 is have an investment fund for a therapist. I'm thinking, yes, true, because it doesn't matter what you do as a parent, you're still gonna muck up somehow. But what I can say is, in terms of identity, build them up to be a problem solver.
Yeah.
And also just give love unconditionally, because when we give it conditionally of like, "Oh, you've done a good thing, cool, I'm going to give you this attention and give you this love and give you this praise," that's what they're going to be seeking in their jobs, the careers, relationships, and everything.
So I want to go back to your story really quick for a minute or two here. You talked about, the first set of skills that you wanted to develop was taking all these courses. Mm-hmm. And obviously the action for that was, the studying, the late nights, doing all the things you had to do, working with the sling on and everything else, right? That was your action. That was your commitment to building those skills. And I think something a lot of people maybe overlook when they're looking at a framework like this, they think the framework is supposed to be this one-time thing, right? Like, no. You get to the vision, you realize that wasn't quite it. You come up with a new vision, new skills, new actions. You keep doing the process over and over until you eventually get where you really want to be, right? So for you, once you get into this relationship that you're in now and your healthy relationship, Were there new skills that you actually had to learn once you were inside that relationship?
Yeah. No, it was beautiful. It was rainbows, butterflies, and lollipops. No, it's always like, when you have you think you've climbed the whole mountain and you realize you're only at base camp. It's kind of like, that's how I see personal development. It's like you're constantly going to the next camp. You reach the summit when you're dead. It's kind of that kind of journey.
Yeah.
And so when we entered a relationship, luckily we're like super self-aware, both into, psychology, body language, profiling, all these different things. So the first, this is so funny. Like the first year of our relationship, it was almost like if we ever had a disagreement, it was the first relationship actually. Every time we had a disagreement, we would actually end up being stronger in our relationship than weaker, which was super new to me, because before it was like, oh yeah, go to bed angry and all these different things. And it's like, ugh. But we ended up having conversations to the point where it's like, okay, have the argument, which is a complete freaking mess. Then there would be like the coach perspective of that argument. So we'll come back together, have a sit down. Right, okay, so what did we notice about this thing? So we're almost dissecting it from this level of a coach. Then it was like, okay, the behavioural profiling, literally going through, okay, what were the needs, what were the fears of that conversation? Then it was like, reading into the body language. And then it was like, okay, well, what's the outcome and what's the best way to move forward in those scenarios? What could we have done better? What did we both need? And it was like dissecting this thing into something that was just absolutely insane. But funnily enough, it's now the body of my research when it comes to developing and creating healthy relationships. So it's been, we're constantly learning. We never had everything 110% figured out. But we can definitely get the majority of it figured out. And one thing that I had to really learn and understand, I think, and this is what I kind of created, like in terms of the 4 C's framework of a healthy relationship, and that's compatibility, consideration, communication. Probably the most important one and the hardest one to get right is collaboration. And the reason I say collaboration is the hardest one to get right is because you've got 2 individuals who need to be accountable for themselves, their emotions, their actions, their lives, their independence, their happiness, all these different things before they're actually in a place to be able to collaborate with.
Yeah.
And the reason I say that is because each individual, their strengths, individual strengths and individual weaknesses will be the strengths and weaknesses of the relationship.
Yeah.
So if you've got one that's not great at finances, guess what impacts the relationship? If you've got one that's, highly emotional and all over the place, I won't tell you which one that is out of me and my partner. That will actually damage, the relationship. So that'd be the weakness in the relationship. So it's being that accountable for your own actions, words, emotions, all these different things. So you're able to be in that place to collaborate and build the relationship. Because if you've got someone who, I don't know, say you've got a niggle in the relationship, like, oh, I really dislike it when you call me X, Y, Z, or there's this thing going wrong or whatever it might be. And the person goes, what are you talking about? Yeah. You've got no way to be able to collaborate. And also, if you've got a person who can't look after themselves completely as an individual before they even come into the relationship, that's only going to bleed the relationship dry. There's going to be no respect there. And also there's going to be a lack of, being equals in a relationship. So when you have 2 people who aren't equals in a relationship, rather than having an awesome partnership with great chemistry and passion, you have a parent-child relationship, whereas a person, it feels like they need to be responsible for the whole relationship, which ends up in a codependent pattern. But that was kind of quite a good tangent. So the short answer is yes, you end up learning lots afterwards.
It's interesting too. You hit on something that I think a lot of people, especially people who are the givers, they struggle with, because initially they're doing things out of love. And so they actually think it's kind of cute that the other person needs them to do stuff, right?
Yes.
But then at some point you start to feel like it's transactional. Like now there's an expectation that you do it. And now it's no longer something you're doing because you want to. It's now something that's expected of you from the other person. And you're
Yeah.
not able to sit back and be like, I created this situation. Instead, you just get mad at the person for never being able to do anything on their own. And now you would end up with a resentment.
Yeah, and do you know what? That's happened too. Like, that's a genuine thing that comes up in so many relationships, and I think it's even been highlighted to a lot of people through COVID and lockdown in particular. The amount of breakups and things I've seen over COVID has been horrendous, and it's because of this main thing. And the thing that we need from people in order to stop going into that place where we take someone for granted is space. But what we tend to do, especially when we're stuck in a building with someone, is instead of going, okay, having space, having individual time, it's, hey, do you love me? Hey, I'm going to do this for you. And it's like this clinginess rather than this, ability to have space, which creates desire, which creates appreciation. And those things really help to keep that relationship moving in a positive direction.
Yeah. And I know we all speak, different love languages. So if you're a giver and the other person, that's not their thing is like something else altogether.
Mm.
They don't appreciate your giving because that's not their language. And they're trying to give you whatever their language is, the way they communicate love, but you're not appreciating it because you want them to give. And so it's
Yes.
this situation where like people aren't communicating. It goes back to what you said. The communication of that is so important. If you don't collaborate and get on the same page and understand each other's needs, it's not going to work.
Yeah, I think one thing that my partner and I sort of introduced was, a weekly review, as cringeworthy as it sounds, but it's freaking awesome because you kind of go through together the things that you've appreciated the most about that week from each other, things that you feel like you can improve on, and the things that you're looking forward to on the following week. And also what it helps you do is it helps you to plan that quality time. Because, life gets in the way sometimes, and it's so easy to put ourselves at the bottom of the heap of everything. And when we put ourselves at the bottom of the heap, it usually means that we put our relationships at the bottom of the heap too.
So real quick, I know we did promise people earlier that you were going to talk to them about how to get a free download from you. So first of all, tell us a little bit about the download itself. Like what are they actually going to get when they download this? And then maybe give us a sneak peek. Give us one or two of those red flags that people need to look out for too.
Love that. Yeah. So this guide, it's 15 pages. Like I put so much into this that you're going to get so much out of it. So it's 15 pages that goes into my exact tactics on how to go ahead and meet the one who you're going to be compatible with to have a long-lasting relationship. So that's whether you want to meet them online or meet them offline. So you go through the compatibility matrix, which helps you to have that long-term relationship. But the other thing that I've put in there is the red flags that you need to look out for to avoid the wrong ones. So a couple of those red flags, because there's 7 in there. So if you want to check them all out, you need to go and download the guide. But the 2 main ones that can be really, really good to look out for is look out for something called the lack of empathy. Now, empathy is what we actually express on our face, for example. So if we feel sad, we're going to look sad. If we feel happy, we're going to look happy. So look out for that empathy within people's pictures, within people's when they have a conversation with you, and also if there's not genuine empathy. So the way we know if empathy is genuine or not is that the motion will actually slowly slip off the face versus slip off the face really quickly. So for example, something that's not genuine is if you see someone that you don't like at a party and they look at you and you smile and you wave, and then as soon as they turn their head, they're like, oh, thank God for that. They're not looking at me. That drop off the face shows that it's disingenuine. So narcissists tend to show disingenuine emotions. And then the other one, which is super important, and this was taken from some research from a guy called Gavin Dubecker, who was head of security for the White House, and he knew lots about different toxic personality types. And it's really simple. It's watch out for the person who can't take no for an answer. So if it's something like, you turn around and say, I can't go on a date tonight, and they say, no, I still want to see you. If they can't respect your decision, or, the fact that you've turned around and said, I can't go on a date, or whatever it might be, that's a huge red flag. So watch out for the person who can't take no for an answer. And then for the other 5, well, you're going to have to download the guide to go and check out the rest.
And there's your ethical manipulation.
I know it's juicy, so it's definitely worth it.
So I'm going to go and put this on the screen for those who are actually watching on YouTube. But for those who might be listening, it will be in the show notes. But if you want to go ahead and just tell them what the website is also.
Of course I can. So it's Love with Intelligence, and the guide is at lovewithintelligence.com/meet. Is it hyphen those little things? Meet
Yes.
-1. There we go.
-dash. I don't know.
Whatever it is. The little just, line thing.
There's a line that comes midway between the words. That's what we're describing.
There we go.
Whatever those are
It
called.
gets technical at like 10:30 at night here.
We have someone who speaks the Queen's English and someone who speaks American English, and neither one of us know what to call this. So,
oh dear. Okay. It's a little like horizontal line. There we go.
Love it.
Oh, dear.
So, Lily, thank you so much for coming on today and sharing your story with us. If someone wants to contact you other than downloading the free guide, what's the best way for them to do that?
So check out the website. So that has my email address there, or you can contact me directly, and that's Lily. So that's liy.walford, which is WALFORD at lovewithintelligence.com.
All right. And I will also include that in the show notes. That way people can find that as well. So thank you again for coming on. And just a reminder for everyone that you are not made to be average. You are made to be more. So go out and be unshakable.
Thanks for listening to the Unshakable Habits Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating and review. To catch all the latest, please subscribe at unshakablehabits.com/YouTube or on your favorite podcast app. You can learn more about Unshakable Habits at unshakablehabits.com. Until next week, be unshakable, my friends.